Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Jiu-Jitsu Times podcast. I am Kevin Bradley, featuring Boston-based Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt and fantasy author Alexander Darwin. Alex, thank you very much for coming on.
Nice
How
to
you
meet
doing
you.
today?
It's great to meet you, and thank you for having me on. I appreciate that.
Now, we could have like a 45-minute fantasy explosion talk, and I very much want to.
It would be a lot of nerdiness flowing back and forth, I'm sure.
Let's see how many of the dwarves from Lord of the Rings we can name. Which would be it? Could a lightsaber cut through a shard blade or something like that? But I would just love to know more about you. So give me a little bit more of your backstory.
Sure. Do you want as far as my jiu-jitsu backstory or the writing side of things?
Well, I want it all, but seeing as we are a jiu-jitsu based news publication, I would love to know how you found. It's my favorite thing to ask people. I apologize for the dogs.
No worries.
They've been jerks all day. One of my favorite things to ask people is how they found jiu-jitsu, because I came about it in a pretty roundabout way, and it always seems to be a story. It's never just like I up and decided to do it.
Yeah, I was kind of I've bounced around a little bit just based on where I was living, but I started when I was going to university in Boston University. There was a club, and this was in 2004. So, wow, it's 15 years ago. There was a club there. It was a free club. It was actually run by a pretty high-level black belt named Dave Ginsburg. He's a Mario Sperry black belt. And it was kind of like run like a wrestling practice. It was all no-gi. Just because it's a club, you don't have uniforms. They didn't have the gi. They don't have very many funds where they can afford the gi. So I walked in. I think I don't really know what attracted me to it. I've always done martial arts, the karate as a kid type of thing. I did some kung fu when I was, in high school, Muay Thai throughout the years, but I wanted to try Jiu-Jitsu out. And it was no-gi, so it was like a wrestling practice, and it was quite grueling, I remember, and I rolled with Dave Ginsburg at that point, and you kind of got that feeling of, I guess to liken it to fantasy, it felt like magic, what he was able to do, and he's not a big guy. I think sometimes people have these experiences especially when they're rolling with smaller practitioners who are quite experienced, and they just have no idea how they're able to control their body so well. Because I think if you're a new guy and you have an ego and you kind of walk into a practice and you roll with a bigger, stronger dude, then you're probably like, well, oh, he was bigger and stronger. But if you roll with someone that's smaller than you and they're able to 100% dominate you, then that's where you really get hooked. So I did that for a while. It was also run by an MMA fighter named Shohei, who I've been trying to look him up for a while. He kind of just disappeared. I hope he's doing all right. He was just like kind of this wandering Ronin. He was a tough guy too. He was this MMA fighter. I think he went to Japan at some point, but so I was there throughout college, and then I moved out to San Francisco, and I trained at a gym out there called Gym 445. And that I actually primarily did Muay Thai out there. I was doing Muay Thai a bunch, and then kind of got back into Jiu-Jitsu. And the Jiu-Jitsu program out there was run by another MMA fighter named Brett Bergmark. His nickname, actually, his MMA nickname was the Angry Hick. And he ran a tough practice too. That was also, I think, all my initial experience was pretty grueling stuff. No one was taking it easy. He was a Cesar Gracie purple belt, and he was training a lot with the Diaz brothers at the time. So he was training for fights, and he pretty much used his white belts as beating dummies. Yeah, he wasn't going easy on us. And then I eventually moved in San Francisco. When I was out there, I moved out near the beach, and there was a gym run by Carlos Sapon. who was a very high level black belt, and I worked my way up to purple belt with him, and then moved back to Boston as a purple belt right after I got my purple belt, which was a little scary. Going back after 10 years, I was in San Francisco about 10 years, and then coming back to entering a new gym as a fresh purple belt. And that's when I met Roberto, and I've been there ever since. So at this point, I'm teaching at Boston Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I teach the fundamentals there, which is pretty awesome. We get new students. It's always great, fundamentals. You get to teach fundamentals, but I think the cool thing is you get, a constant stream of new students, people that have no grappling experience whatsoever. So it's to me, it's a constant reminder, both, where I came from and what it was. Lots of people for a really long time, you forget how much of a privilege it is and how cool it actually is, because you're doing it just like anything. You're doing it every day, and you forget, this is praising, because you get these wide-eyed people walking in and they have no idea what's going on. So yeah, that's basically my background for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I really like teaching. I've been teaching for about 6 or 7 years now. And yeah.
So when you show up to fundamentals class, is it basically like you go from being a Padawan, getting your ass kicked all the time, to suddenly you're shooting force lightning at people, like you're Sidious, you're throwing people around?
Yeah, no, I'm one to make some. I'm extreme. Everyone in my class, my students know I'm extremely dorky. And I've made some, and I'm a dad, so I make a combination of dorky dad jokes all the time, which get mixed receptions, but I keep doing it.
There was this one time I was rolling. My good buddy Jeff Nelson is a purple belt, training in Connecticut. And like us, he's also a dual. He actually is the one that got me hooked on Stormlight Archive. He is a very big fantasy guy, and we'll be rolling, and he'll just say, "For real, dude, you got to read The Hero's Journey by Joseph Campbell, or the Hero with a Thousand Faces by Joseph Campbell." And I'll just be crushed in Neon Belly, and he'll just hold me there, and he'll be like, "So really, what it's about is how these legends kind of compile on each other." And I'll be passing out because his knee is the size of my head.
It's funny when you're rolling with someone, and you have to have someone you really know well to have some sort of dialogue with them when you're rolling. But it is funny having, like, you don't want to have a conversation with someone you don't know, because it could be disrespectful, and they're they're training for a competition or whatever, and you're kind of talking in the ear. But if you have a good friend that you're rolling with all the time, it is kind of fun to be able to chat a little bit, not too much, but while you're having a roll.
It's every now and then, it's you feel it out. Now back to fantasy. Something that I think you'll agree with is that fantasy combat usually falls into 3 categories roundabout. It's either some crazy magic stuff going on, sword fighting, or just huge armies. It's like you never really see hand-to-hand stuff, and that is where your book, your new series, The Combat Codes, really just immediately bucks the trend. Like, the first scene in the book is like taking place in the fighting pits with like an old grizzled scout seeing these kids like looking for new talent, and you're getting a lot of really technical stuff right off the bat. Like, there's a smaller opponent facing these are kids, and they're facing, like, there's no real weight classes. But what made you want to go that route with this story?
Yeah, it was kind of a thought experiment I'd been kicking around in my head for a while, and the thought experiment was, what if people weren't, fighting wars with weapons of mass destruction and munitions and all sorts of stuff like that? What if it was simpler in a way, and nations or empires or even businesses resolve their disputes essentially by having a champion, and that champion representing that governing body. And I mean, it's pretty much like, you know, the Olympics to some extent, where athletes are representing their countries, but in this case, it would be for everything, instead of, you know, again, fighting wars for land or resources, which is what pretty much, you know, or dogmas, why people fight right now. It would be resolved with the champion. And that thought experiment, you know, led me down a path, and I've been kicking around quite a bit. And I thought it would be cool to you know, see what happened if I tried to build this world. And you know, the way I've found that I write is I'm more of a discovery writer. And I don't know, you're probably a fan of George Martin.
Yeah.
What he says, which I like, is, you know, writers are either gardeners or architects. And you know, architects would be someone who outlines quite a bit prior to writing, and then a gardener is someone who kind of, you know, has a general concept and then starts writing. And I definitely am more on that. If I outline too much, it kind of makes me lose my passion for actually writing, because you've kind of already gone through the motions of everything by outlining too much. And some people do that quite a bit. So anyways, so I, you know, just started exploring where that took me, and these characters came to life, and it kind of, you know, I put it together after that. But the original thought experiment it still stands, and that's just, you know, what would happen if that were the case. And of course, there are lots of byproducts where if everything was on the line for a single combat fight, then imagine what already happens in the UFC, where people are, of course, you know, taking steroids and trying to market themselves, and there's money on the line.
Real quick, I'm not gonna lie, the combat in the first scene was really, really engaging. But the thing that hooked me about your book, there was this one line where the Murray is walking down the street after the fight, and someone, in the same way a vendor would be selling hot dogs, someone's going like, high level creatine, high protein powder. And I'm just like, for a minute, I'm like, oh my God, I want to live here so bad.
Yeah,
that was it. I was like, oh, like that. All the meatheads. Just, if we ran the world, that'd be great.
Yeah, but you can imagine if everything was on the line, if nations depended on these champions to win, to essentially get, you know, resources, what would they put into these champions? What kind of, you know, technology or you know, biological modifications or training regimens? You know, imagine if, you know, where we are, imagine if the United States, everything depended on, I don't know, who's the top UFC fighter from the US right now? I don't even know. I don't follow the UFC as much as I'd like to, but
Israel Adesanya, he's not even. He would go back home and fight.
Exactly. Yeah.
Fight for New Zealand. American girl. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I mean, I hear stuff every once in a while.
We got to get Mighty Mouse back.
Yeah.
He's a nerd too. He'd be all for it.
You know, though, back to the connection between fantasy and, you know, mixed martial arts and jiu-jitsu in particular is another thing that, being, you know, I've always been a fantasy and sci-fi fan. As a kid, I'm unashamed to say I played Dungeons and Dragons for many years. You know, all the video games.
Now I'm gonna just hijack this. I'm not gonna ask if you've ever played a monk. I'm gonna ask, how many monks have you built?
Well, actually, it was Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, so that was not a class.
That wasn't a class yet. Oh, right.
But for example, in Final Fantasy, I would play all those role playing games. I would always really like the characters that did hand to hand combat. You ever play any of those RPGs like Final Fantasy?
I'm a huge Dungeons and Dragons fan.
Right.
In fact, I just recently think I finally convinced my mom it's not satanic, because she was He was trumpeting that horn. I was briefly part of the D&D club at school, and she found out, and she's like, "Oh no!"
Uh-oh.
She
Of
bought
all the
into
things you could be doing, playing D&D.
She's like, "Can't you do drugs like a cool
Can't you
kid?
do
I mean,
something cool?
come on, Kev."
But
But
really, I mean, what I noticed the most about jujitsu, especially in contrast to other martial arts that I took, which is traditional martial arts and um, even kung fu, we'd beat the shit out of each other pretty much with no technique whatsoever, which was just didn't show me anything. But when I was able to learn jujitsu, it was the most similar to having some sort of magical ability or superpower or whatever you want to call it, but it kind of tapped into my inner, fantasy role playing person where it was like, this is actually real life. I'm building, if you ever played Dungeons and Dragons, you build a character, you're role playing and you build your character up. If you ever played like massive multiplayer online role playing game or any video game, really, you build a character up and then you continue in that world. But this was like, whoa, I can actually build myself up. I can gain skills and techniques. I can collect these techniques and I can actually use them in real life, on the mats. And
I'm pretty
that's
sure
pretty cool.
I'm pretty sure the first time I ever pulled off a scissor sweep, I don't know if you've ever heard, I don't know if you've ever played Persona, but I'm pretty sure in the back
I
of my
have
head
not.
something was. Whenever you level up in the game, there's this voice that says, "I am thine, and thine art out," or something. I remember hearing
You
that.
heard that?
Yeah, I'm like, oh crack! I just leveled up my tarot card level or something. I need. This is making me want to go play a bunch of games.
Yeah, and do jujitsu.
Oh my gosh, I do a Shark Tank and then I log on to WoW for a little bit. Then I go back to the Shark Tank. But so a lot of people have these thoughts, but what do you think was the thing that made you confident in going out, putting them on paper, and building this world? Was it something that you struggled with initially, or was it like immediately, this has got to
Right.
come out of my head?
I think confidence is a part of it, but I think it's almost. I actually talk about this. I think in the acknowledgments of combat codes, but jujitsu actually was pretty instrumental in creating a mindset that allowed me to, complete a novel, and then let alone I just have finished the second novel. And it's a big undertaking to write a full book and keep going through it. I'd written several books before, but had given up on them just because you have this inner voice and you read through your stuff, or you might circulate it a little bit and you say, this is really isn't good enough. But the fact of the matter is, just like with jiu-jitsu, writing is not something. I mean, you do have some inherent skill in doing it, based on how much you've been writing as a kid and growing up, and what you've learned and what you've been exposed to in the world. That's all goes into your writing, but really it comes down to just writing. It's just like people kind of think about it just similar to martial arts and jiu-jitsu. You think there's like this muse or inspiration, and if you don't have the passion and you don't feel it, then you're not going to write. But really, most of writing is just grueling. It's just like digging a ditch. You just got to do it. You dig it, and you're going to have a lot of dirt in there. You're going to have a lot of shit. It's not going to be good, a lot of it. And then, a lot of it gets done in the editing process. You're going to have a draft. You're going to have many drafts, and it's drudgery. And just like jiu-jitsu, you really have to embrace part of it. If you walk onto the mats, and you're going to get smashed a lot, as we all know, when you first start, and it's very easy to give up and get discouraged. And I think it's just that mentality of trying to, set a schedule and keep going and realize that it's a skill. It's just like, it would be kind of, I think we hear this all the time in jiu-jitsu, and it makes sense to people that grapple is, people guys who don't train any combat sports think they can fight. And yeah, I mean, everyone has a puncher's chance, but it's silly to think that. That's just like saying, like, I'm going to be good at guitar, but I've never played guitar before. I'd probably be good at it. And it's very similar with writing. Writing it's a skill, and you just have to, as you know, being a writer yourself, you just have to put down the time and the hours to some extent, and then pursue something that for me, martial arts, I'm passionate about martial arts. So I wanted to write about something I'm passionate about. And I'm also passionate about fantasy, science fiction. So it was a good fit. And then, but the main thing was just not stopping. And, even the first few drafts are pretty bad, and you read it over and you go, whoa, this is not good, but you can make something of it, and you kind of mold it together.
I think it was Neil Gaiman. I think I remember seeing part of Neil Gaiman's masterclass where he's like, the purpose of your second draft is to make it look like you knew what you were doing the whole time.
Yeah. I listened to that as well. I love.
Oh,
Neil
yeah.
Gaiman. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
My brother, my brother is not a fantasy guy. He's like meathead Marine, super like jock dude. But for some reason, like he was able to understand and fall in love with Interworld, which like is a book Neil Gaiman wrote many years ago, and it's got like multiverse stuff, and it's just high concept. I can't understand it to this day, but for some reason, he flew with it.
Spoke to him. Yeah,
Neil,
it spoke to him. I feel like Neil, he reaches actually an audience somehow. I think based on his writing style, but also the content he writes about. He totally reaches an audience outside of traditional fantasy that's pretty cool. I mean,
he makes you feel he gives you a lot of big concepts without making you feel like he's talking down to you. Like, oh, I built this crazy, aren't I great? Like,
yeah,
patting himself on the back. Like, it's very much like I get the feeling that he wrote Sandman because if he didn't, he'd never be able to sleep again. Like, this is going to drive me insane. I need to get it out of me.
I think that it's an addiction, just like Trey. But I like a quote that Neil Gaiman said about writing a draft. I'm misquoting him now, but he pretty much says that for your draft, you have to explode onto the page, and then you go back and pick through the shrapnel, and you see what works, and then you start putting it all together. But that's really the case where you just gotta just go for it and really not turn off that inner voice that's constantly, looking at every paragraph, every sentence, and trying to correct it to make it perfect.
Let's brief, like we just mentioned Neil and also Brandon Sanderson, which if you're listening to this, go out and read everything both of those men have ever produced. It's brilliant. But did you draw any specific inspiration from any authors, them or any other people in the fantasy world, or?
Yeah, so most of it is indirect, but I'm sure some of that stuff is so permeated into my brain.
Ubiquitous, yeah.
Right. I'm sure I'm some of my closer friends who I grew up with and played Dungeons and Dragons with and read the same books, would call me up after they read the combat codes and say, you just took that straight from that, didn't you? And I'm like, get out of my brain.
I thought it was a brave choice to have the whole book resolve around a bunch of people having to deliver a ring someplace like that. Brave. I've never seen that before.
Especially with a character Samwise. No. But yeah,
the circle. What's a ring if not a circle?
I think there's a few. Sanderson definitely, as far as stuff I've read more recently. I'm a big fan of Sanderson, primarily Stormlight Archive, which I know, Kevin, you're very familiar with. I like, as far as also a more recent author, Pierce Brown, who's written the Red Rising trilogy. It's not a trilogy, actually. Now there's like 6 of them. And that's definitely, that's like a dystopian book that I highly recommend. That's a good one. There's 6 or 7 of those. When I was a kid, I read a lot of books that took place in the Dragonlance and Forgotten Realms universes, and those are loosely based on Dungeons and Dragons as well. So I read quite a few of those. Some of the big authors there are R.A. Salvatore.
Real quick, who's the elf that's like the central figure in all the R.A. Salvatore books?
His name is Drist.
Drist, that was
Joe
it.
Worden, yeah.
Okay.
And he writes some pretty epic action scenes too. Actually, it's not hand-to-hand combat, unarmed, but some of the melee in those books, like the Dark Elf trilogy, it's pretty good combat there. Lord of the Rings, of course. As far as sci-fi, I'm a big fan of Altered Carbon. I know there's a TV show of that now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. Let's see what else. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I think some other stuff will come to me, but
yeah, not to get into spoiler territory, but there's actually a scene in Oathbringer, I think, where one of the it's the first time I've ever seen a grappling match.
Trying to remember.
It's Dalinar.
Dalinar.
He
Yep.
challenges one of his men to just like a wrestling match.
I remember that.
And he gets pinned, and the whole time I'm like, oh,
yes,
this needs to be stretched out for 100 more pages.
Yes.
You're making me feel really bad because this is the first dystopian fantasy book I truly would love to just live in.
Well, I don't know if most people would. I mean, we both like Jiu-Jitsu, but I think if we were forced to fight for resources, it might make it a little more stressful.
Yeah, no, I'm a scout. I'm just going out and watching these fights.
What was I going to say? Oh yeah, that one of the things that you reminded me of is that scene from Oathbringer with Dalinar, where one of the things I was always looking for scenes like that with grappling specifically, and I would you go through a movie, Lethal Weapon where Mel Gibson throws on the triangle, or you see John Wick, and there's some choreographed jiu-jitsu in there, and there's just these little, especially books. Altered Carbon had some grappling in it, and if you've read Expanse, have you read Expanse?
There's a
TV show
read list about it. Oh, yeah. Expanse, the TV show? No, I haven't seen it.
So, but in the book, there's some jiu-jitsu in that as well. It's like space jiu-jitsu, but I would always find those parts and kind of read them over and over and say, I wish there was more of this here. So that's another reason why I wrote the combat codes, because I feel like grappling, the movie industry has kind of caught on to it. I think there's more choreographers that are in the Brazilian jiu-jitsu world. I know like the Machados are big on that, and they're tapped into the celebrities and they're doing some of the choreography, and I think that's becoming more prevalent now. But I think for many years, the striking element, which is more, from a visual perspective, for people that don't know how to grapple, grappling isn't really as sexy, I would say. But yeah. I think now we're just catching on, and I think people, especially because of UFC, and there's a lot more education out there now about grappling and what that is. I think people are getting a little bit smarter, so that was another reason that I wanted to write the combat codes, to kind of highlight grappling and the realism of grappling within, combat in general.
Now, real quickly, I just to your point, one of my really good friends, Tristan, who I actually ran an MMA club with in college. He is a high level Muay Thai fighter with like a big background in boxing. I'm pretty sure if Manny Pacquiao asked him to kill someone, he would. But he was raised on Power Rangers. Like it's his favorite. It's one of his. He was raised on Manny Pacquiao highlight reels and Power Rangers.
Is he Filipino?
He is Filipino. Yeah. Yeah. No, he is. He's just in love with it, and both his parents are like super high level martial artists too. So he was just born into it. And he was telling, we were talking, and he doesn't really like weapons, and so his favorite parts of Power Rangers were when they were just regular people that would get into fights, or like when
Right.
Tommy did the karate tournament, or when the Power Rangers had to fight hand to hand like the minions, and like his interest would peter out once they got into the robot, because he's like, okay, well, I
Forget
mean, they're
that.
just gonna, yeah, like that's a robot, it's dumb. His least favorite thing is like energy like beams. He's like, that's stupid. That's dumb.
Yeah,
Give me tough punches. Give me like his one of his favorite anime is like Baki, just because of how ridiculous
I've
it
watched
gets.
some Baki, and then there's All Rounder is another. I think that's a manga though, where there's
Yeah,
quite a bit of grappling in that as well.
yeah. There's also Tengen Ashura. I think it's a
Yes,
Netflix one.
yeah,
Yeah, that
yeah.
one's really good.
I haven't seen
But
that one yet.
it is. There's a guy who's just a jujitsu fighter, and
Really?
it's funny because it's still an anime, so they have to do jujitsu. Like he has to do anime stuff. It can't just be jujitsu. Like he's got to go into the zone before he does something, and it's like it's treat like a try like regular basic jujitsu is treated like, oh, this is the craziest stuff ever. But I still love it
Right.
because
No, I like that stuff
it's
too.
legit.
Ever since Fist of the North Star way back, and that's certainly not very realistic.
Oh my! Okay, so let's briefly talk about who we're following. You know,
Sure.
like we're getting two very distinct viewpoints for most of the story. We got the older, more grizzled fighter, and we've got the young up and comer, both trying to better each other. And we're introduced to that older perspective through Murray. Now let's briefly talk about him and how you developed him. He's got elements of Mickey or Mick from Rocky compared,
Right.
and like he's got. I think I see a little Dalinar in him.
Right. No,
But
that's one of those.
also but
Yeah.
he's also he feels like a real life just wrestling coach. You know, he's got the cauliflower ears, like he's his own person. So just how did you develop him, and give us a little bit of insight into
Sure.
his
Yeah, so Murray is a character. He's as you said, he's kind of a older, washed up fighter. They're called Griever in this world.
yeah.
And there's certainly a lot of those influences you mentioned. He is a talent scout. Essentially, he's been sent to these slave circles where these kids are essentially just fighting for gambling, and he's sent to find talent and bring them back to this combat school for one of the nations that he lives in. And he's very disillusioned with the whole process. And he is a former champion. So he was a former champion for this nation, meaning this is bigger than a UFC champion, because he's a national hero. Like, think a combination between a war hero and a MMA fighter, and kind of fuse them together in that this man was a lot of the resources that this nation was able to achieve was based on Murray winning his fights.
He's like a warrior king almost,
Exactly.
like for a community. Yeah.
Yeah. So he, I don't want to give away, what happened to his career, but he's now down on his luck, and he's drinking quite heavily. He's grizzled, and he ends up seeing this kid in the slave circles fight, and he's kind of this kid, after seeing so many kids and kind of becoming disillusioned. This kid Seago catches his eye, the way he moves, the way he fights, and that kind of brings their two journeys together, and they are, as you said, they are able to progress forward together.
It's always a relief when I get like straight confirmation on how a name is pronounced because I wasn't
Yeah.
100% sure. Is it like Kego?
Yeah.
But like it's
Well, you know what? The audio book came out recently, and there's a very good narrator. His name is David Sweeney Bear, and he's a British guy, and he does a fantastic job, and it just everything he says. He would ask me, because when you do an audio narration, he gives you a style sheet of every pronunciation, and will run through the pronunciation of every single name. And this is a sci-fi book, so it's every single name, every single landmark. He wants to make sure he gets it right. He's a professional. And he was going through all these pronunciations, and some of them were not the way I had imagined it, but I was like, well, you sound so much better than I do saying those. So that is actually the way it's going to be.
I listened to a little. I haven't gotten through the audiobook yet, but I remember he says it griva.
Yeah.
Like it's very, very, very dramatic, and
Yeah,
I
so
definitely like that.
he can do like all the. I know in the UK there's just so many different not dialects, but so many different um, types of accents. There's like the blue collar accent, and there's
I think dialect is the right word
dialect.
for it at
Yeah,
that point. Yeah.
he can do them all, and he did a good job. And by the way, the audiobook is free. I don't know if you've seen it's on. I'm releasing it on podcast. If anyone is interested in listening, it's free
On iTunes, yes.
Yeah, so feel free to check that out. And
We're gonna be sure to include a link somewhere at the end. But yeah, so that brings us to Seago, the younger fighter. He's very disillusioned with the life or the society that he's living in, but he's also got to contend with the fact that he is very good at living in that society. He's a very talented fighter. There you got to like it's like being really equipped for a bad system. Like you either have the choice to you could easily live in the system and live out your days very successfully, maybe like end up better off than anyone else, or you can work against your own self-interest and try and change things. Tell us more about Seago. Sorry. I need to chill out because I'm very excited whenever I get to talk about nerd stuff and jiu-jitsu. So my brain doesn't really
combination.
My brain is sort of, it's like I've taken a bunch of Xendrin and I'm just sort of like, calm down, man.
No worries. So Seago actually is I forgot to mention, I'm definitely influenced by Ender's Game. I know
Orson Scott Card. Yeah.
Right. I know there's been some comparisons as far as the Battle School and Ender's Game and Combat Codes has a big portion of the book. I'm not really giving a spoiler away because this is in the blurb. A large portion of the book takes place in a combat school called the Lyceum, where essentially kids are training various martial arts, and that's their sole purpose for being there, which is another reason, by the way, that I wrote the book, is because I always thought that would be pretty awesome, starting up Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Muay Thai, and thinking, what if this was, beyond being a professional fighter or even teaching it, what if this was all there was, like in a university, you're going to, which class are you going to take today? But anyways, Ender Wiggins, it was definitely an influence, whether conscious or subconscious, for Seago, in that he's a bit of a mysterious character with a very enigmatic upbringing and background, and you don't really know literally or metaphorically where he's coming from, but he does have this uncanny ability toward violence, specifically unarmed combat. But you're right in that he's a bit more complex, which you find out through the story. His past begins to unravel a little bit, and in the second book, Griever's Blood, we find out a lot more about Seago and his past as well.
Yeah, Ender's Game was definitely one of those books because even the protagonist was being misled, and that's I'm not going to give everything away, but like it's a very it speaks to what does doing good mean when at the end of the day you did it under like false pretenses or without a full amount of information.
Right.
Like we don't know a lot, but also we find out that there was another layer of mistrust.
Right. No, and Ender had some good fights too. I know he has that bathroom that stuck with me. That bathroom brawl he has
He's
where
getting bullied.
he's getting bullied, and he
Yeah.
kind of suddenly turns it on and makes a show of just like fast violence towards this bully, and I think that scene definitely stuck with me. I don't remember if they really recreated that in the movie, but the scene from the book, I remember that very well.
I never saw the movie, but I'd imagine that after the end of after all the events in the books, Ender shaved his head and changed his name to John Danaher and just started teaching jiu-jitsu in New York. Because John Danaher is a psycho. He's just very chill about it.
You know what though? It's those characters. I mean, all the jiu-jitsu as well as combat sports in general. We've got a lot of characters. That's for sure. That's what I'm always.
Oh my! There is a whole mythos, and I love it.
Well, it's beyond whether you're for them or against them. I have my own opinions about various people, and that's fine. Everyone has their own opinions.
Probably talk after,
right?
Yeah.
But no matter how you look at it, at least from a writer's perspective, it feeds a lot of stuff because you have these characters, whether they're real or not, whether it's for marketing or not. They're all sorts of personas. It's very interesting.
I mean, it's just you're getting so many different people that could very easily be characters from a book. Like right. Andre Galvao, I'm not going to speak in positive or negative, but he is a comic book character. So is Keenan. Keenan is a comic book character.
Right.
Ryan Hall, he is basically like Captain America before the super soldier serum.
Ryan is a character. I've rolled with him. He's
really?
He's awesome. Yeah.
Oh man, he's got this mind that is just a labyrinth that me and Tristan, because I got him to start doing jiu-jitsu and he got me to attempt striking a few times before I absolutely quit like a little girl because he's a very small guy, but he hits me like a 50-pound weight every time.
It's no fun getting hit.
Yeah, no. He's like, I do this because you choke me out a lot. I'm like, I can't breathe. But yeah, jiu-jitsu, the longer I stayed in it, the more I realized that these people are so interesting. And right. it's like a fly trap for interesting people, jiu-jitsu.
I think more so, we may be biased, but I think more so for jiu-jitsu than mixed martial arts. I think mixed martial arts, you do have a little bit more. They're certainly super. Like if you look at Israel
Adesanya,
yeah, he's a comic book character.
Oh yeah,
look at that guy. He's a comic book character. But in general, I think jiu-jitsu does attract a very wide breadth of people from varying backgrounds, and whether it be their nationalities or whether it be their personalities or their education. I think everyone's coming from a different place, and that's even in my classes. That's something that's always pretty cool. And I know everyone says that about jiu-jitsu is you're really getting exposed to a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds and walks of life. So I think jiu-jitsu is pretty unique in that sense.
From what I've gathered from talking to people, because the best part about my job is I just get to really meet and get to know a lot of the people in jiu-jitsu. The guys that see a UFC fight and join, and they're the tap out guys, they go out and buy their wardrobe before they show up to class. Yep. 22 Monster t-shirts, just like ripped up jeans, like studded belt, Ed Hardy. Like they don't tend to last very long. It's the weirdos that could tell you everything that happens in the first 50 issues of Action Comics. It's the guys that are just like, really, What would happen if Batman had a Green Lantern ring? You know, oh wait, that actually happened in a comic this one time. Let me tell you about it. I think it's those guys who like to really get into the mechanics of everything and just the mythology of
I
everything.
think, especially in the gi, I know it's a trope that people in the gi are different than people in no gi. And personally, I love both. I couldn't do with either gi or no gi. It's like they're yin and yang. They're just like they exist together. I love both, but like there are certain characters you get in the gi that are, I would say, maybe you have a bit more cerebral. I don't know what it is about the gi and I guess the slower pace. Maybe it's strangling people with clothing. Somehow people that are nerdy like to do that. I have no idea, but there is something about people that train in the gi that they're a certain type, I would say.
A lot of arthritis too. A very high correlation of just like
I
wrinkled
got
up.
that coming, I think.
Oh damn!
Yeah.
Damn! Yeah, man.
Well, this one keeps my wedding ring from coming off because it's kind of thin, but it can't get over that knuckle.
Oh wow. There's that video of some engineer using a bunch of string to like get a woman's too small wedding ring off. So like you're fine in the long run. I gotta ask, did writing these scenes, these very well choreographed and written scenes, do you think it helped your jiu-jitsu, or did your jiu-jitsu, like, was there a mutual benefit? Did having to really sit down and think about how these interactions would play out on paper, do you think it had any kind of positive impact on how you rolled? Or
I would say more so writing, probably not so much, to be honest. I would say the thing I know, and they could be mutually a part of each other, is teaching. And I know a lot of people say that, but talking about techniques and actually going through the motions of teaching techniques certainly has helped my own personal jiu-jitsu game quite a bit. And I know, as a writer, I sometimes might, especially if I'm kind of going through something in my head quite a bit, like a specific technique that I'm about to write about, or a combat or a grappling scene, I might reutilize some of the language when I'm teaching my class. So I think they certainly play in together. But for me, teaching really is I highly recommend, especially purple, brown, black belts who don't teach yet. And you're looking for a way to improve your game, especially if you feel, stagnant, and there's an opportunity for you to even help out teaching, or even, I'm not telling people to, when you're one-on-one working with someone, to suddenly start teaching them. But if you have an opportunity to teach class, I think that can dramatically improve your game and put you in a mindset where you're really analyzing yourself quite a bit, your own technique, what you know, what you don't know.
I got it. I only asked just because I've had to cover a lot of MMA fights and also jiu-jitsu matches. And
Right.
Early on, like I'm just like a one-stripe blue belt, but I came in with a journalism degree, so I knew
Right.
how to write. But these scenes are like these transitions and these chains of movements are very difficult. So, sitting in with Ed and running my own jiu-jitsu club on campus, I found that having to explain this stuff to other people, it made the words come easier to me when I had to write them for like Gordon Ryan versus Husmar Paul Harris, or another one that I can't name off the top of my head, just because I'm truly, it's like 90% fantasy, 10% jiu-jitsu right now. Now I'm just like, for this whole conversation, I'm just like, I wonder if like, would Aragorn pull guard? Or
what percentage of jiu-jitsu fans do you think are also fantasy or sci-fi fans? Because then we could dictate our conversation based on what that percentage is.
I would say 75%, if only because my other podcast is in a Star Wars discussion podcast, and my two co-hosts are a black belt and a purple belt. So
there you go.
Like
Star Wars. There we go. Another influence.
That is a huge one. Oh, especially with like just the like, oh yeah, no, like how you've used sci-fi. You go a little bit more into sci-fi than Star Wars does. It's more of like a space fantasy. Like there's never any sort of really long dalliance on the technology behind a lightsaber. There's a magic crystal. There's a kyber crystal. We're not going to go too far.
It's metachlorians. If you ever wonder what's going on, it's just the metachlorians.
It's midichlorians, you know. And we can't talk about Star Wars because then I'll eventually have to talk about The Last Jedi, and I'm not prepared to.
I have not seen it yet.
You know, so. Hey Alex, you're doing great. You're living life the right way.
I should just stick with The Mandalorian as where I'm at. I don't need.
You should go and watch the new season of Clone Wars when it comes out.
Okay,
but also The Mandalorian's great.
I love The Mandalorian.
It's so good. It's so really good. Is. Pedro Pascal, I'll watch literally anything that guy is in.
Right. And the fact that he's not even in his face. Actually, I don't want to give spoilers, but
we're not doing that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Watch The Mandalorian. Gosh, what was I going to say?
I think we were talking about the breakdown of Jiu-Jitsu fans that may or may not be.
When I talked to Ed is my Jiu-Jitsu coach, and he's I've known him for years and years. And he's the biggest Star Wars nut I've ever met. I don't think he's probably top 5 trivia off the cuff guys ever. He's got a whole action figure set up at his house called Crisis on Infinite Alderaans. And it's just this massive sprawling thing.
Does he ever make you guys do like cosplay while you're grappling?
Oh no, he doesn't like costumes and stuff. Yeah, he's very much like it needs to exist in my house where I can control it and funnel it and refine it, and just like he's got a ton of Black Series. But I asked him how do you describe jiu-jitsu to people? And he just looked at me and he was like, Kevin, it's the Force. It's an energy field that surrounds you and penetrates you and binds you together. My training is the Force. I can trust in it. It allows me to move through the world easier because I know I can do things most people can't, and if I meet someone that I got to use it on, but who also knows how to use it, then that's like a showdown that happens in the wild where Force users meet up. You get to see how good you are,
I fully agree with your coach, Ed, in that what we're talking about sounds dorky and almost borderline, I would say fanatic. But the fact that you have this ability that you train all the time, jiu-jitsu, mixed martial arts, any real martial arts where you're actually live training and testing your techniques in a live setting at full resistance, I would put them all in a very similar category. You know what you can do. You've been tested. You know exactly what you can do with another human's body, and you know how to distribute your weight. And as you walk around in the world, whether it be a business meeting or social interaction, and that is what people recognize about other jiu-jitsu folks, is they're often quite a bit more chill and calm, and it's because they have some sort of inner confidence that they're able to carry with them. So it's the Force, and I think it's a good thing, and it helps you be, I think, a nicer, kinder person, because we're going and grappling during the day, and then or in the evening, whatever you do, and then you can go out into the world.
I think that you can. I would truly split that into just covering all practical martial arts guys. Like Tristan. I met him because I was working out in the gym, and I suddenly started hearing this loud, like bang, bang, bang. And I go downstairs because I was doing cardio. I go downstairs to check it out. There's one of those like punching bags that you put water in at the bottom. It's like it's not really, you're not really supposed to do anything serious to it. And the whole gym is sort of just watching this tiny Filipino kid just sidekick again and again and again. And it's just so loud. And he's got like AirPods in or earbuds.
This is a regular weightlifting gym?
This is a regular weightlifting gym that they stuck a punching bag in if someone wanted to do like cardio kickboxing, and this kid is murdering it. And I want to go up to him and say hi, but I'm also so terrified because the look in his eyes is like I'm practicing to break ribs, I'm practicing to break legs, I am gonna break something like. And so it actually, I ran into him after that, like a few days after that. And I'm like, dude, you're the guy.
You're that guy that's kicking that back.
You're the guy. And then I'm like, I do jiu-jitsu. And he's like, oh, for real? My sister is like going to be an Olympic wrestler one day. And I'm like, that makes perfect sense.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so I think that it's the effort and it's the confidence. It's like, it's its own unique thing. And you recognize that across, it doesn't need to be just jiu-jitsu or grappling. I think you sort of see that in everybody, you know?
Right. When I if I come out of, first of all, if I don't grapple for a while, I get grumpy, as my wife will tell me. But after I grapple, I come out there, I'm dealing with work. You know, I work beyond writing. I still work full time. I'm fine. People yell at me. People can tell me off, and I'm just like, okay, that's fine. A side note to what you were saying there, as far as regular weightlifting gym experiences, I have one of my good training partners. He's a very high level black belt. He's a black belt sambo, black belt judo. I think black belt in some karate, and he's a high level boxer. This guy, his name is George, and he's from Georgia. He's not a big guy. He like trains some of his students at their local weightlifting gym. There's like a meathead kind of gym, a lot of big guys, and they just go right in the center of the gym and they'll like pummel. They do a bunch of Greco together, so they'll like pummel and this is all no-gi. And then every once in a while,
Ken Shamrock's Lion's Den, just like
he'll have like a big dude just be like, hey, can I try that? And not almost like just curiously, and then he'll just like, you know, pretty much manhandle these guys, and then they'll be really interested in it after. So it's interesting that in the center of a gym type of experience.
Yeah, I think the levels that the levels of awareness are definitely getting better, but you still get surprised by what you find just out there. Like when my brother was I'm looking at him in his dress blues right now, a picture of him. When he was getting ready to go to the Marine Corps, me and Ed, because he's a family friend, we decided we were going to I had only been training for a few months, but we decided we were going to get him as sharp in jiu-jitsu as possible, like super basic takedowns, meathead jiu-jitsu, just like how to defend chokes, just getting used to those positions. And it's because, you never know what you're going to face at Parris Island. And then they did their combatives program, and I'm not gonna say anything mean, but the ideas are different.
He did well.
He did very well. He's now I think he's a high level, like I think he's like a tan belt, like a higher belt in their combatives program.
Right.
And they were going over rear naked chokes, and they do them a little differently. And so when they were practicing, his buddy would get him in the choke and he'd squeeze it. And he's like, dude, stop being a hero. You got to tap. And Sean's just like,
you're not actually.
It's the artery. Like I can fit my, yeah, no, it's like you got to sink it in. You got to do a bunch of like little things. Like people will tap to miss discomfort. You know, that's sort of what I'm getting at. Like they'll feel something a little uncomfortable, but the more you get into it, the more you can realize when you're really in danger. Like I used to tap from knee on belly.
Right. Oh, I still, longevity is certainly a thing. So it's one thing if you're training competition, but if you're going to have some popped ribs, you live to fight another day. That's what, longevity is pretty, I would say, for a lot. One thing I tell my students a lot is, especially guys or girls who are getting a bit older. And I mean, we all love grappling, and it's tough when you're off the mat. So I think a lot of your decision making, apart from competition, it's one thing if you're training for competition, then you have to take risks that essentially you're risking injury at a higher percentage. But if you're just training to be on the mats, then you have to let stuff go, and put yourself, out of positions where you're gonna sustain injury.
Now, what I really like about this book is that it's definitely a love letter to like MMA fans. Like, there's a lot of stuff, like the protein stuff. I still I tell people about that. I'm like, guys, like, you got to read this book. He gets it. It's just, like, I have 3 different protein jugs in my closet. One of them Chips Ahoy flavored, just because I love trying different ones for like the macros. And but the world and the conflict setup is so interesting that like it's gonna hook fantasy fans,
right?
And no offense to traditional fantasy, but a few people are gonna go sign up for like medieval sword classes, and
right.
like there's not really a learn to cast fireball class,
Right?
But
Right.
this, like, it's showing combat and just the reality of it. Did you intend to also maybe entice more nerds into MMA or jiu-jitsu?
You know what? I did write it with martial artists in mind, but certainly I especially lately with the second book that's due out shortly. I really have been reaching out to fantasy and sci-fi fans. One thing that I say is, and I've had a lot of readers that are not even martial artists, and the common thread is they say that the techniques and the combat in it was very, very detailed and seemed very realistic. I didn't understand all of it, but I got it. And what I do is I treat martial arts, the techniques, the grappling, the stand-up, I treat it like a magic system. So you have let's just talk the most accessible magic system, Harry Potter, right? You have an invisibility spell, and no one knows what that is. When you read it, you don't know what that incantation is.
It's just,
you assume it's magic, but you learn it throughout the book. So that's what I try to do. I introduced, this is a fireman carry. I use the Japanese or the Portuguese or the English terminology for the martial arts, which is I'm just taking it straight from the source. And a layman who doesn't understand or practice martial arts won't know what it is. But if I introduce it over and over, they're going to say, "Oh, kataguruma is shoulder, fireman's carry," and they will know that by the end of the book.
He's charging up his Uchimata.
Yeah, they'll know it. Just like if you're reading Harry Potter, Wingardium Leviosa. Everyone, there's kids running around saying that, and it's a made up magic spell. So the same thing. That's what I attempt to do with martial arts techniques is treat the techniques like spells or like magic, and hopefully and one of my goals is for regular fantasy or sci-fi readers to be able to pick that up and also enjoy the fights. You don't have to know martial arts in order to be engaged in the fights.
When you said I think of MMA and jiu-jitsu as a magic system, it made me so happy.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna cry. Oh my God.
We're both fans of Sanderson, and we know Sanderson has some of the best magic systems. Have you read I know people don't like Raw Fuss because he never finished.
Oh my
but
God.
I mean, no matter what you have to say about him, people hate him, but they only hate him because they love him. They hate him because they love him.
Alex, you're gonna get me in trouble, man. Okay, here's what I will say about Patrick Rothfuss. He is a beautiful writer. His prose is great, and sympathy. Okay, sympathy. I think he does. I get the sense that he's a little too proud of all this imaginary math that he's made up, and it's like, I form a sympathy. What you got to do is you got to hide something in your brain and then split your brain in half so another you can find the thing that the other you hid. And I'm just like, oh my God. It doesn't help that he also made like damn near a Mary Sue as the character. Like Kvothe is the best musician, swordsman, magician in history. It's
I like the first book a lot, and I don't want to give spoilers away, but the second book where he ends up in that
the forest.
That I couldn't. I was like, what?
The people that are watching this that know, we all know what you're talking about.
It was like
the worst.
It was like a weird, like 70s. I'm not gonna get into it. I don't even know.
No, I read it, and yeah, you're right.
It was strange.
Yeah, no, but I will say the world he made is beautiful. It is very like the Chandrian. Like I want to know more about it, and it's a great example of taking elements like there's a lot of the ring wraiths in the Chandrian, but they're almost like Nordic in a way, like they take the elements of the naming, and the naming system. He's got a bunch of systems working together. There's sympathy and naming, and just a lot of crazy magic that we don't know yet. And I heard that the Doors of Stone, is that the last one that's coming out?
It's been a while. Is that actually coming out?
I heard that it was coming down the pipe. I think
he's been saying that for like 6 or 7 years.
Yeah, but in the time it's taken him, Brandon's he's churned out 8,000 books.
Yeah, that guy's awesome.
He locked himself. What he did, he locked himself in a room in order to finish the first draft of.
I read that. I follow him, and he's
the progress bar. Yeah,
his lectures on
at BYU. Yeah,
he releases all those. Those are that's good stuff. I've been watching that stuff for a while.
Oh man. Okay, well, I think we got time for one more question.
Sure.
I want to do this for another 7 hours, but we both have lives, or you have a life. I'll probably find someone else to talk to about fantasy for a while until I fall asleep. Between the first book and the second book, how many lessons did you learn? What kind of improvements do you think you made? What changed, or if anything?
Yeah. So. I wanted to write the second book right after I finished the first book because first of all, I know you have to be steady as a writer especially if you want to do this as a living. You have to have some regular production. We're just talking about the difference between Sanderson and Rothfuss and really it being
and how one's better than the other. Yeah,
I would much rather be Brandon Sanderson. The problem is I had 2 kids in between the book. My 2 daughters were born, and that really derailed me. And I'm not upset about that because I was able to give, and I still am obviously able to put time into being a father, and still training jiu-jitsu and teaching jiu-jitsu. I was a brown belt when I finished the other book, and that's been about 5 years now. And obviously I'm a black belt now, and I teach and I train. So there's been a lot that's changed, but I was not in the right headspace, or I did not have the right schedule or amount of enough time to be a regular writer. So I've changed a lot, certainly becoming a father between those 2 books, and I have been writing not as steadily, before I started drafting book 2, Griever's Blood. I had been writing not as steadily as I'd like. I wrote a few pieces for some jiu-jitsu publications. I wrote actually a piece on Anthony Bourdain, who was a big hero of mine.
Yeah.
For jiu-jitsu style, and about his anonymous. I don't know if you read it about his anonymous Reddit profile. Where he actually had and I had been somehow I had a gut feeling he had been on the Reddit Jiu-Jitsu forum as an anonymous user for several years, and I being a big fan of Anthony Bourdain's, I was like, this guy writes a lot like Anthony Bourdain. This was a white belt writing about his experiences, just posting on this forum and saying, I'm just starting this out, and he would write this beautiful prose straight out of Anthony Bourdain's mouth. I'd be like, this guy's either like a really big fan of Bourdain or is is Bourdain? So I followed this guy over the years, and I was like, this is Bourdain, and he's on this forum because he just loves jiu-jitsu. He loves it so much, and he's just posting. He doesn't give a shit that this is just a completely anonymous profile. So I wrote a piece on that, which kind of got, really, to be honest, launched me back into being more passionate about writing. Again, he was one of my heroes when he passed away. I was like, fuck this, I'm gonna write the second book. What would Bourdain do? He said, just pick yourself up. You think you're a morning writer, I would be like, I like writing in the morning. Okay, I feel the best writing in the morning. I have my cup of coffee. I get up early. I'm a morning person. That's where I'm going to get my most get my word count the highest. And then with 2 kids and full-time work and training and teaching, I realized that's silly saying I'm a morning writer and pigeonholing myself to only writing in the morning. You do what you're passionate about when you can do it. So I would after the kids went to bed, lunch break, just write whenever I can. And I had to relearn. I had to get good at writing and switching my brain from parenting or from my regular work into writer mode. And that's hard, to be honest, being able to switch into that mode. But I got better at it, and I was able to chip away, and I finished the draft in about, I would say, 6 months. I think, to be honest, if I could write all the time, I think I could put out a draft in like 2 or 3 months, with the time. But you only get the time, dude. And then editing. I actually enjoy editing a lot more now, and it's kind of like refining technique. And so I think a lot of that has probably the second book will be out very shortly, so we'll see. Hopefully people like it. I think having 2 daughters certainly influenced me on my 2 girls. Now they're 4 and 1, but I'm already having them wrestle each other a little bit. Just get, I don't want to push them too hard, but I think grappling is a natural, boy or girl, doesn't matter. Grappling is just natural for kids. And it should be natural for adults too. I think it's like our form of play. I think all mammals, play. So I've been, I don't want to get too far into that. I've been pushing them that way, but there are, one of the main characters in the first book, one of the main female characters is we have a separate storyline for her in the second book. She's like the daughter of the most famous, fighter in the world, and I don't want to give anything away, but she has her own quest, her own journey in this second book, and I think certainly having 2 girls influenced me to push it a little bit in that direction.
All right. Well, we well and truly could keep doing this. At least I could. But I think now would be a good time to call it.
Right.
You can follow Alex on social media. We'll include all the links. You can buy the combat codes on iTunes. You can find it on iTunes in the form of podcast, audible.com. You can buy it off of iTunes library. And where else can they buy it, Alex? What am I forgetting?
You can get the ebook. The ebook is on Amazon. Currently, the first book is also only 99 cents because I'm really trying to make a push to get more readers for the first book, so that the second book.
You can charge $85 for the sequel. I get it.
Yeah, exactly. And Audible, as you said. So just type in combat codes. You'll find it. Give it a try. Hope everyone enjoys it. Again, it is a bit of an ode to martial arts as well as fantasy sci-fi.
And you can follow Alex's Instagram page and other social Instagram and any other pages that you got.
Yeah, it's all of them. Instagram, Facebook. It's all just combat codes.
Yeah, you can follow those pages for updates on the sequel. We'll definitely be having you back once that's out, and
right. And the sequel will be out first half of February.
First half of February. All right. Well, I have been Kevin Bradley, joined in studio by author and Jiu-Jitsu black belt Alex Darwin.
Hey, thank you so much, Kevin. I appreciate you having me on.
All right. Well, good night, everybody. Go out and read.
Go train.
Go train and read.
Both.
Both.
Thank you.